Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today is another good day the Lord has made. Thank Him for everything. Give thanks and praises to Him. And we humbly ask Him before we start to give us His wisdom so that we can be able to understand what we are going to learn today. We totally depend on Him. Without Him, there's nothing that can be done. So we commit everything into His hand. Now, today we are going to talk about conflict, the types of conflict in a project environment. Like I said in my previous lessons, that project or conflict, sorry to say, is inevitable as far as the execution of project is concerned. Or to put it more simply, project environment is always characterized with different forms of conflict, one way or the other. Like I said, one must always look for a constructive way of addressing or resolving conflict. Constructive way of resolving conflict timelessly before it gets out of hand, before it gets escalated. Okay, right. Like I said, we are going to talk about the different types of conflict. Going to take you through the slides, and by the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different types of conflict that one could find in a project environment and how to deal with those conflicts. Right. So we said conflicts may arise from communication problem, even within the project environment. When the communication, the directives that needs to be passed across to the team members are not clear enough, right? On its own, it can constitute a kind of conflict, right? Conflict from communication problem, or it could be from structural issues which could be seen or which could be based on the way the project environment or the project organogram or the system processes are designed. It could as well result from personal issues. Personal issues. For example, if the personal development goals and objectives of the team members are not aligned with the project goals, if the expectations of the stakeholders, not necessarily the team members, let me put it that way, are not met, it can constitute a kind of conflict in a project environment. Like I said before, the most important thing is to address the conflict constructively and timelessly. So once whatever conflict that arises or that comes that you find in the project, one should be able to, or one should devise a means of addressing such conflict decisively. So, like I said, we said conflict could arise from communication, right? The different types of conflicts from communication. It could be a kind of misunderstanding, like I said, unclear messages, It could even arise from poor listening, right? Not being an active listener, right? And barrier to effective communication can create a tension. So all this by virtue of is study on a way of preventing a productive communication. So it can constitute a kind of a conflict in the project environment. If a message or rather a directive is passed across and is being misunderstood somewhere at the receiving end, so what is going to happen? Obviously, it will create a kind of a conflict. Uh, if a message that is put across is not being heard properly, it's the same scenario of creating a conflict in the project environment. Or poor listening when someone is talking, or you as a team member, you're receiving directives from the team member or rather the project manager, and you fail to pay active attention. Lack of active attention can as well constitute a kind of conflict in a project environment, right? Or any communication barrier. For example, let's say it's a phone call, then there happens to be a lot of noises in the background, and which would constitute a kind of a barrier for the receiver to hear clearly what is being communicated. So it will make that person not to comprehend what has been communicated, and it can create a kind of a conflict. Right. Now, that one is communication factor. Now, let's talk about the structural factor. Structural factor that would constitute a kind of a conflict. Conflict may come from participation level. For example, if this system is designed in such a way that there is what we call that is not encompassing. Let me put it that way. If the system is not embracing diversity, whereby certain people are being alienated, which means the system is designed in such a way to be non-inclusive. It can non-inclusive in the sense that it's hampering or preventing other people from participating or being part of decision-making process. It can constitute a kind of a conflict. We call that structural factor, right? Or for example, let's say the reward system. If the reward system is designed in such a way that it favors certain element of people, whilst others are being disfavored, right? I'm talking in terms of favoritism, favoritism, tribalistic method, all right? So that can as well constitute a kind of conflict in the project environment. The reward system. If the reward system is not harmonized, right? Harmonized in the sense that there is that existence of disparity, whereby certain type of people they get rewarded, commensurately with their efforts, and others are not being rewarded the same. So it can constitute a kind of a structural type of conflict, right? Recognition or independence within the project team, right? In a situation whereby certain type of people are not given the opportunity to act independently on their own, of which they are capable of acting on their own, productively or constructively. So that type of situation can as well constitute a kind of a conflict. Then The other variable that we can talk about here as well is the personal factor, right? Like I said, personal factors, something that has to do with personal issues, right? Self-esteem, values, right? In a situation whereby a team member or a specific team member is having some qualms, you know, on his own or her own, and that qualms is getting exported to a working project environment. So it can constitute a kind of a conflict on its own. Then self-esteem, you know, self-esteem whereby people feel that their self-esteems are not being respected or whatever they are claimed to be are not being respected as such. It can create a kind of conflict in a project environment, same as the values, needs, and personality. So those things can constitute a kind of conflict, whereby we said personality may affect how members relate to one another. If they feel that their personality are not being respected either by the project manager or their peers, their team members, so it can constitute a kind of a conflict. So to summarize it in terms of types of conflict that could arise in the project team. We talk about communication, right? On the side of communication, on the side of the processes of the design of the processes and procedures in the organization, in the project environment, if you will, based on this context, then the personal factors. Right. So here we are going to talk about the barriers to communication that can as well lead to conflict and that can constitute a conflict in a team member working in a project environment. Then we have a project team, as we said, must recognize barrier before they become a conflict trigger. Right. Remember, when we were talking about the types of conflict, we made mention of communication factor as one that could create a kind of conflict. Right. So before it triggers and become a conflict, so it's advisable you as a team member or as a project manager, as the case may be, to be able to recognize what type of communication barriers that could trigger conflict. So one of the communication barriers that we can easily identify here is physical. Physical. Physical barriers can constitute a kind of a communication problem that can trigger conflict. For example, noises, like I said, gave example of how noise could hamper effective communication or rather productive communication, if you will. Then we talk about the distance. Distance depends on the proximity, right? If it is of close distance, then it can improve communication, if or productive communication, if you will. If it's of a far distance, it can hamper it. And uncomfortable spaces, these are the context or physical context, if you will, that could hamper productive communication. Then we're going to talk about the perceptual, which means the interpretation of message by individuals, by respective individuals. Right. So it can as well constitute a kind of communication barrier, the way people perceive, the way people interpret messages that are being put across. People have their own perception, the way people see things. Different people see things differently. So that could also constitute perception or perceptual factor or variables, as you may call it. Then we have another important factor there that could constitute a kind of a barrier to clear communication. We call it emotion, something that has to do with emotion, fear, right? Fear can constitute a kind of a barrier to communication, right? People could be afraid of executing directives that has been cascaded to them, right? People can be afraid of doing what they should do, or let me put it more simply, being afraid of the unknown. There are certain people that are fond of being afraid of the unknown. So it can hamper uh, them, or it can prevent them doing what they're supposed to do, which one we can that can constitute a kind of a barrier to such a communication, right? Then you have mistrust. Mistrust is another variable that we can consider here as part of the emotional uh, factor that constitute a kind of a barrier to clear communication. For example, if a receiver have no trust, got lack of trust on the source of the message, there is no way that message or rather that communication will be productive or will be effective. And there's strong feelings and all those kind of stuff. Then another important factor that we can consider here in this context is cultural. Cultural, that is differences in diversity or group of culture, right? Which stand can also affect or constitute, if you will, the communication barrier, right? You got people with different cultural beliefs, right? With different norms and values, which the way they receive things or they accept things based on their cultural values or based on norms, their areas of their culture could be different from others. And that can hamper the way they uh, embrace the communication message that has been passed across to them. Then the language, which is another big problem as well, depends on how the communication is being phrased. Yeah. So if a communication or a message is being phrased in jargon that the recipient perhaps does don't understand, right, it's gonna obviously create a kind of a barrier. The slang or language differences, of course, we do know about it, right? For example, now as I'm talking in English, so if my audience are English speakers, obviously they will be able to understand, to decode what I'm talking about, right? What if there happens to be French speakers or people that speak Spanish or whatever? They will not be able to understand. So that is another thing that can communicate. So you must consider the context, the type of audience that you speaking to, so that you can be able to, for you to be able to know the type of language or the message, how to frame your message and the language to use to enhance or to be able to improve on your communication. Then the gender, right, is another factor that do constitute a kind of a barrier to communication. Misinterpretation linked to different communication style. There are different ways. For example, here we can talk about men or women or female. There are different ways, of course, that you need to communicate to a certain type of gender for that communication to be effective. Right, I don't want to go too much about that, but you know what I'm talking about. Then, strategies to deal with issues or conflict in a project environment. Like I said, Conflict in the project environment is inevitable. I've said that over and over again, right? That is inevitable. But the most important thing is how you deal with it and how timelessly you address whatever conflict that arose or that is arising. Then these are the strategies that could be employed for one to be able to deal with issues of conflict in the project team or among the project team. Right. Then one needs to choose a strategy based on the seriousness of the issue and the time available. So I'm not saying that one must deploy all these strategies to deal with one specific issues. Right. So these are recommended strategies, if you will, but the choice of each and every one of these strategies or the choice of any of these strategies depends on how serious the issues is. It depends on the context, right? Depends on the time that is available, right? Based on the context, the seriousness of the conflict, and the available time you have to deal with the conflict timelessly, that would provide you or inform you, it will inform you on the type of or the strategy you need to deploy for you to be able to address such issues or such arising issues. Then, by virtue of the strategies, we have one here we call negotiation. Right? Of course, there will be certain time whereby you need to negotiate for you to be able to resolve the issue by way of you discussing the issue and seek a solution acceptable to the team, right? Whereby you need to negotiate among the conflicting parties and look for the best solution to address the problem. You negotiate, like negotiating the deal, like what you experienced in most of this international conflict. A good example is what is happening now between Iran and the United States. They're negotiating deals based on certain claims. This one is talking about nuclear weapons. This one, Iran will not ever be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Those kind of stuff. So all along they've been negotiating. You know, hopefully one day there will be a deal, come to a compromise, whereby they will be signed. They will ratify whatever deals that have been put together. So that is what we are talking about. We have to discuss the issues and seek a solution that is acceptable to the team, to the conflicting party. Right. Like I said, between United States and Iran, the Republic of Iran, of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they need to come to a kind of a compromise. It has to be negotiated. Of course, that is what they'll be doing. And it's a pity up to this point of presenting this lesson, no deal has been arrived, struck. Then backing down. Backing down is another way of dealing with issues or conflict, whereby you need to step back when the issue, yeah, you need to step back. But let me tell you that this one is mostly applicable, or you can deploy this when you see that the issue is minor or when preserving harmony matters more. So, what are we trying to put across here? It's advisable to use this strategy of backing down. One, when you discover that the conflict itself, the issue is something that is not so much, it's a minor case. So why must you waste time and resources on the, you know, dealing head on with issues that is minor? So when you discover that the issue is minor, it's not something of such a big deal, then you back down. How do you back down? You step aside, right? Mostly do that. Then another instance whereby you could back down is for when you discover that you don't want, you want peace, of course. You want peace to reign instead of one constituting the unpeaceful scenarios. And you say, okay, let's back down, let's step aside and allow peace to reign. And the peace will reign. Then there will be harmony, peace and harmony, of course. Then the other strategy that one could deploy in a conflict environment or conflicting project environment is changing focus. Changing focus as it applies. You have to shift attention from disagreement and focus on shared goals and project outcomes. So that is another way, another strategy that one could deploy constructively to address issues or conflict in a project environment. You change the focus instead of we focusing on what is gonna divide us apart. Let's focus on what is gonna bring us together, you know, based on shared values and shared goals, which is a very good strategy. Call it a changing focus. Right. Then there is another type of strategy that we have here. We call it insisting. Insisting. What does it mean? You insist on the ground rules to prevail in making decisions. Okay, now this is how it is. Let's see what the law states. What does the law stipulate as far as this issue is concerned? Okay, let's comply with the law. Let's use the law, whatever stipulations that are contained in the legal requirement or in the regulation, let's allow it to prevail. That is what we mean by the system. Use agreed rules or authority when a quick decision is necessary, right? But what I can tell you is this. You can employ this, or it's advisable to employ or to deploy this type of strategy when you want decision to be quick. You don't want things to be dragging, prolonging things for quite a long time. So you want decision to be quick, yeah, to be quick and effective, and not expending much resources or financial resources, time or whatever to resolve the conflict. Then you can deploy this kind of strategy, which is a system. Let's look at the book. Let's see what the regulations, let's see what the rules or authority says, and allow it to prevail. Right. Then the last one is confrontation. Confrontation at times could be dangerous, right? Could be dangerous. I don't know how many of you do watch this. Is it a movie or what they call the cheaters? I don't know how many of you do watch it. They call it the cheaters. You know, those days I used to watch that program whereby, for example, if your spouse, whosoever that is cheating among couples, then they report to these guys, and these guys will be monitoring using camera surveillance, to track this alleged persons. And whenever they get hold of that person, then they will say, "Do you want to see your couple, your partner red-handed? If you got the heart to go there and catch your partner red-handed, they'll say, let's go there, they'll take you there. But you need to have a strong heart. No, that is not for the fainted heart. You need to have what we call a lion heart. for you to be able to confront. So, the same way, in a project environment, you need to be very strong. Sometimes it could be catastrophic and catastrophic to the extent of destroying so many things that were not previously envisaged. So even in for that program that I said just now, these cheaters, sometimes it can be catastrophic, but sometimes it can help to repair things, to address conflict. Okay, here, back to what I'm explaining here, then confrontation, as it implies, to address the problem directly when it cannot be ignored. So that is what you mean, or how you deploy confrontation strategy in dealing with issues or conflict in the project environment. Right. So this is another aspect that I would like to explain to you, which is very informative as well. That can help you in managing your team members in the project environment. Of course, not only managing your team members, stakeholders alike, or inclusive, all encompassing, right? Use it to build relation between team members and stakeholders. So we say participating in good relations between the team members and stakeholders, which is very healthy, right? For the success of a project. Like I said before, the success of a project is reliant on the stakeholders. So if the stakeholders are not satisfied, or let me put it like this more simply, if the expectations of the stakeholders are not met, obviously that project will not be regarded as being successful. So one needs to be able to, or one needs to deploy whatever strategies available to make sure that there is that good relationship between the team members and the stakeholders. So how does one do that? How does it apply? We said good project relationship extend beyond the team to everyone affected by the project. Right. So when we say everyone affected by the project, by way of conceptualization, we are talking about stakeholders. We can conceptualize stakeholders as anyone or anybody that is being affected by a project or that is affected by a project can either be negative or positive as long as that person stands a chance. It could be a person, individual, it could be a group of persons, it could be organization or whatever, that stand a chance to lose or gain as a result of the project. Let me put that again more simply. We can simply conceptualize stakeholder as an individual or group of persons or organization that stand to gain or lose as a result of the project. It's a stakeholder. So maintaining relationship between team members and stakeholders are very important. So as we said, a good project relationship goes beyond the team members, but right, it has to be extended to the stakeholders, all the stakeholders alike. Then you need to add that how does that one work? We said strong relationship make coordination easier and help the project team solve problems faster. So when there is a strong relationship, it enhances coordination as well. And whenever there are problems or there is a problem, it can easily be addressed because of the bond, because of what I would call the relationship, the tight relationship between the various stakeholders. So one need to identify key stakeholders, right? Then, such as team members, project manager, client suppliers, and community members, key stakeholders in the project. Then you need to formulate means and ways of communicating with them respectively and how to provide them information on time, which is very important. You need to keep them along. You need to make sure that they've got updated information about the project, updated information, and make sure that they know not only the progress of the project, know about the achievements as well as the challenges of the project on time. Then keep commitment and follow through on agreed actions, right? Then you build trust by being ethical. One needs to be ethical, of course, right? In a project environment, you have to be ethical, reliable, and transparent, and as well celebrate progress and acknowledge the contribution of each and every one of them, right? So, with respect, there's communication, there's trust, and accountability, right? So, what we are saying, there should be respect, there's communication, there should be trust, right? Whatever things that needs to be done in the project, that relationship needs to be anchored on trust, and one needs to be accountable, right? That accountable stands to reinforce the trust, the element of trust in place. Then support, one should be able to support others, support where support is needed, and the recognition, of course, of achievements should be celebrated as well. Now, what are the key takeaway as far as this lessons is concerned? Right? One, understood that effective project team depends on the attitude, right? Attitude of the not only the attitude of the project leader, it also extends to the attitude of the team leader as well. The way communication is being deployed, the way information is being disseminated, way directives is being disseminated or given the team members, and the way that reporting is being made as well. And the the roles and responsibility of individual stakeholders, like I said, must be clearly defined, and there should be a mechanism to manage conflict constructively and decisively. Then we said every team members must feel valued, which is something that is very, very important to enhance the success of the project. Each of the team members should feel valued, right? Valued, right, based on ethical ground or whatever, and they should feel valued that what they are contributing is acknowledged, is valued, and it makes them to be able, or rather, to be motivated to contribute responsibly. Then constructive behaviors, of course, we talk about that, which we say go a long way in boosting trust. Right? Trust, as you see, it helps to strengthen relationship. Then, besides that, it helps to boost cohesion, right? Helping to enhance the cohesion among the team members to be able to work together, right? And improve towards improving performance. And it can help to boost performance as well. When there is trust, the unity is there, that cohesion is there, obviously it can help the long way to boost their performance, right? In the sense that they can afford to go extra mile to put in their best. We can help to boost the productivities of each and every team member, each of the respective team members. Then team dynamics, of course, we talk about that, the team spirit to boost the cohesiveness and the truth. Then we talk about how team dynamic improve when members are consulted and decisions are made jointly, right? Joint decision making tool which can help to boost team dynamics. Of course, that will help them to feel valued and which can make them to contribute responsibly. Then we talk about the clear roles, right, of communication, how open communications and positive leadership can build a team spirit. And lastly, we discussed about issues, in other words, conflict, project environment, and how such project or sorry, how such conflict in a project environment should be addressed through the appropriate or deploy the appropriate strategy. So yeah, that is the end of the lesson. Thanks for listening. Gonna stop here.